Hey everybody, Coach Mark here, and before we dive into today's topic, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrabio. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time, and the odds are very good. I would love to work with you. With that being said, let's get into it. Today's topic is going to be the repetitive effort method. So this is the third and final one in the effort series in the Conjugate system. Now, as far as repetitive or repeated effort, it's every bit as important as the other two, that is dynamic/developmental and max effort. However, it tends to get lost in the shuffle when people talk about or look at Conjugate online. Reason being, in my opinion at least, it doesn't have the same visual appeal as neither a max effort lift nor a speed variation, especially with accommodating resistance. In short, you want to think of repetitive effort work as your accessory work done after your max or dynamic effort lifts to help build muscle mass, improve body composition, train work capacity, and continue to attack known weak links through smaller movements. It's base building work. So in terms of big influences for me when it comes to this sort of thing, because the RE work is all about building muscle mass to support higher peaks of strength. One of the best things I ever did was think about it from a power building type perspective, in that you're chasing not only high reps in a pump, but also getting strong for those reps, increasing the load, progressive overload. So in learning about the power building approach and mindset, I went to one of the OGs of powerlifting itself, and that is Steve Shaw. And just as a side note, Steve's honestly been one of my best friends and mentors I've gotten the pleasure of knowing since I really started into the whole online side of fitness. So I do want to say, just, for all of you out there who are looking to learn more, he is a great source of information. And Steve, if you're watching this, I want to say thank you for helping me out so far. So that being said, I actually have him as a guest speaker on today's video, and he's going to talk a little bit about Conjugate in the massive iron world.
In the massive iron world, I don't do conjugate per se, but the way I program, I do a lot of A-B splitting or concurrent periodization. For example, on bench press, we might have a higher rep week and then a lower rep week, or if you're benching twice a week, we might do both in the same week. The same with the deadlift, we do a lot of A-B splitting, so we introduce some variation, some exercise variation, and some ways to induce different forms of stimulus and different forms of attack into a training. And I don't really let clients know what I'm doing. I just kind of put it in there and let them run with it. So when it comes to conjugate training, I've been around the industry quite a long time. And I was really, I can remember the internet back in the old West Side days when people started to catch on the West Side. And conjugates started to get passed around everywhere. I think a lot of people don't understand conjugate properly. It seems like kind of a mystery that's really hard to unpack. I think a lot of people trying to dive into what they thought were West Side and what they thought were conjugate principles, but they were a little bit lost and a little bit off target. I really like what Mark is doing because he's actually bringing a lot of clarity to conjugate, doing a lot of wonderful education, and clearing up a lot of the mistakes I saw with conjugate type of training way back in the early ages of the internet.
So to briefly summarize what Steve was talking about, he uses concurrent styles of training in that he aims to improve multiple dimensions of a lifter's abilities at once. So strength, work capacity, and muscularity overall. He might use an A-B rotation, such as deficit deads one week and then block pulls on another week. Bench could be trained for load one week and then for volume the following week. Now, additionally, if you've read some of his books or any of his material, he's very big on pushing hard sets. One of the things he always champions is set and rep schemes aren't nearly as important as progressive overload. And he'll often advocate for the last sets on isolation movements being taken to maximum safe quality reps with the last set and using that as a progression indicator. So for example, if you're doing 3 sets of 15 on tricep press downs, he might say make it 2 sets of 15, and on the last set, if you can hit 20, that means it's time to go heavier next time you're doing tricep press downs. So because repetitive effort is essentially generic muscle building work, it wouldn't be fair to say that I'm making changes to the methods as much as I am adapting it. I mean, there are so many different muscle building protocols out there, right? But in general, what you'll find is I tend to gamify progressions in that I don't have flat set rep schemes, but I have some sort of win condition that indicates, okay, now you get to add weight. And I got that from Steve Shaw. It's one of those things where he talked about is chasing hard sets. Those are your proxy for progress. So that's one of the big adaptations I like. Secondly, you'll find I rarely go over 3 sets on given movements. And then lastly is the heavy use of bodybuilding type intensifiers. First and foremost, when I talk about gamifying progressions, what I mean is having clear win conditions and progression indicators. 4 sets of 8 or 3 sets of 12, they're great set rep schemes. They've been around forever for a reason. They are battle tested and well proven. However, for myself, I've found when I use that type of progression, I don't push as hard. They tend to check out a little bit. But by setting a hard win condition, I earn the right to a load bump, and mentally that tells me, okay, I want to win this workout. So it could be something such as getting a total amount of reps added up across my sets, attaining a specific amount of reps on a given progression's last set, or spending 3 weeks reducing my rest time between sets before I add load. Simply put, I'm more likely to attack the accessory work, and thus I get better results from it. Remember, if you're not getting stronger on your accessories, they aren't going to help you. You're never going to turn a 135-pound floor press into a 405 bench. Next up, you'll find I rarely go above 3 sets. While volume is certainly important and you do want to get practice with various movements, for accessory work, I'd rather do, say, 3 sets on 4 different movements than 4 sets on 3 movements, simply because I'm more likely to stay mentally engaged and attack every single set on those movements. Plus, that bit of variety in terms of movements might be a bit more enjoyable for me, and as I've talked about before, I will gleefully trade a little optimal for a lot of enjoyable. In general, I rarely exceed 6 to 7 movements in a workout, and outside of those main lifts, right, if we have 5 accessories, 15 challenging sets should be plenty because you are chasing those sets to be intense, to be difficult, and you are straining with every single one. Because each set has higher intensity and strain induced, you're gonna need less volume. Muscle building is highly signal dependent. So we just need to send a message to our body and have the body hear us loud and clear. Hey, you need to build muscle and get stronger. And that's done via tension and effort. Whereas if we just crank up the volume without really improving the signal, it's just a whole lot of noise. And then last but not least is I love bodybuilding type intensifiers. Now this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think strongman athletes in general should be stealing from bodybuilders more often. If you look at bodybuilders training, it's fundamentally focused on high efforts with rep capacity, which better aligns with the demands of strongman specifically. For example, you're doing max rep deadlift for 1 minute. A rest pause type approach might actually be highly valuable for you in that context, whereas rest pause squats for a power lifter may be valuable in the off season, but it's less common, right? But rest pause, myo reps, 8x8 method, those are just a few of the methods from this world that I'll find myself continuously reaching for in both my own and my clients' programming. All right, so now we're just going to go over a few accessory type progressions I really like to use, and we're going to start off with myo match, where you're going to do an initial set of anywhere between 12 and 20 reps, and then you do follow-up cluster sets to match set number 1. So for example, you hit 20 in set 1. Set 2, you might go 15, 3, 2. Set 3, you might go 12, 7, 3. And when your last set needs 3 clusters or fewer to match set number 1, you get to go heavier next time. Next up is the top set and back off method, where you're going to hit a top set of 5 to 8 reps and then drop the load by 20% and then do 2 additional sets of 10 to 12 or more reps. Go heavier when that first set meets or exceeds 8 reps. Side note, this is also used as a max effort variation. There's nothing wrong with chasing top sets on your accessories as well. Remember, we want hard efforts. Rest pause method. You're going to perform an initial set of 10 to 15 reps and then take 20-second breaks and push for 5 total sets. So you might go 10, rest for 20, 8, rest for 20, 6, rest for 20, 3, rest for 20, and then 1, and that concludes the set. And you're just going to do that one time. Now, if you went 10, 8, 6, 3, 1, you got 28 total reps, so you're not going to go heavier next time. Your progression indicator is 30 or more total reps across the 5 clusters. And play with the rep range a bit. If it's something like a lateral raise or a tricep press down, you might bump that up to 40 to 50. Again, these are all general guidelines. Monkey with them a little bit. The 8x8 method. You're going to take a weight that you could do for, say, 15 to 20, and you're going to do 8 sets of 8 with 30 seconds rest. And there's 2 ways you can progress this. You can either add weight when you successfully go 8x8 with that movement, or what you could do is trim 5 seconds off your rest every single week, and when you take that given weight out for 8x8 with 15 seconds rest, then you would go heavier. As a sidebar, someone actually ran this progression with their pull-ups while doing Conjugate Kaiju, and they were able to build to 8x8 pull-ups, which I just find incredibly impressive. The MNH method, which is short for max and half. You're going to hit a max rep set of anywhere between 12 and 20 reps, and then 2 to 3 back-off sets where you're doing half or more of that initial set. So for example, if you went for 16 in your first set, and then your 2 follow-up sets were somewhere around 9 reps per set, you'd add weight. Whereas if those 2 back off sets you hit around 14 reps, you need to stay where you're at. The 2RD method. This is probably my most popular accessory progression that I've released. I've had people who have seen it put it into old programs that I've actually released prior to 2RD's inception. So if there were one that I would say you should try out, it's going to be this one. And how it works is you're going to pick a rep count that you like, anywhere between 6 and 20 reps. It's your call. The first R stands for rehearsal. So you're just going to perform that specific rep count. So let's say you're doing 2RD8. Set 1 is 8 reps. The second R stands for rep out. You're going to take that same weight that you did in set 1 and go for max quality safe reps. And the rule of thumb for progression is if you meet or exceed 2 reps over rehearsal, it's time to go heavier. So if you go 2RD8 and your second set is 10 or more reps, add load. And then after your rep out set, you're going to drop the load by 10 to 20% and perform an additional set of max quality reps. The breakdown method. You're going to hit an initial set of 4 to 6 heavy reps. Then you'll drop the weight by 20% for a set of 10 to 15 reps. And then lastly, you're going to drop down to half of what your top set was for 20 to 30 reps. So for example, if you were doing it with dumbbell bench press, you might go hundreds for a set of 4, 80s for a set of 15, and then a pair of 50s for a set of 30. And you'll add weight when the first 2 sets are at the maximum end of the rep range. Also worth mentioning with the breakdown method, I rarely use this one on max effort days. I might use it for a supplemental press after my dynamic effort pressing, but it's one I tend to reach for very rarely because it does border on being max effort. However, one that I do like it for is times when I'm traveling, if I'm in a strange gym and they just have machines, because if the machines go heavy enough, you can really get a good workout with this method. The density approach. Set a timer for 10 to 12 minutes, and you're just going to perform max total reps using a 10 to 12 rep max load. Try to aim for 6 to 8 reps per set, and you should add weight when you exceed 40 quality reps in that time frame. This one's really nice for weighted calisthenics. I also like it for supersets, such as doing chin-ups and ab wheel. Makes it for a great way to get the work done, and because you can just kind of put your head down and work, it's not so mentally taxing. Additionally, amazing for the work capacity. Lastly is the RG or rep goal method. And all you're going to do here is you're going to hit 2 to 4 sets and pick a total amount of reps you'd like to attain, 30 to 50. And then if you hit or exceed that total goal within your set limit, add weight next time. So for example, 3 RG50 means in 3 sets you want to get 50 or more reps. So if you went 20, 15, 15, you get to go heavier next time. So just a few final notes here. Don't get it twisted. Basic set rep schemes such as 4x8 to 12 are more than enough. This is just how I like to do it to make it more enjoyable for myself and again, attack every set. The goal isn't only to get a pump or get sore, but you want to get stronger on these movements. Again, a 135 floor press for however many reps is never going to take you to a 405 bench. In general, when it comes to isolation type exercises, I only do no more than 3 per session. Don't be afraid of machines here. After your big compounds, the reduced stability demands of a machine allows you to effectively overload the targeted muscles. I mean, heck, the great Zydrunas Savickas was a big fan of a Smith machine shoulder press. And then lastly, most research I've been able to find shows that there's similar muscle growth occurring anywhere between 5 to 30 reps when you equate for effort. So let your personal taste as well as comfort dictate this. For example, I'm never going to focus on 6 rep max skull crushers because my elbows hate the sound of that. Whereas if I push that to the 8 to 12 range, my elbows feel a lot better and I can still get adequate overload. And if anything, I'm going to chase the intensity a little bit more, and then I can go lower reps on my heavier compound pressing type accessories or main movements. In a nutshell, repetitive effort work is training to develop a wide base of additional muscularity and work capacity using lower demand movements to support higher peaks of strength and performance. Alrighty, now that we've covered the 3 efforts of the conjugate system, we're going to be moving more from theoretical to practical in the next video, as we'll be discussing various training splits and templates to see how these methods are laid out across the week. I'm also going to be sharing my so-called Freudian split, as it actually got a lot of attention when I'd initially shared it, and people seemed fascinated. And then after we discuss splits, we're actually going to be moving on to sample programs, applications, and adaptations, so you can see conjugate applied to a wide variety of populations and in various instances. That wraps up today's lesson on the repetitive effort method. I want to thank you all so much for watching, especially if you've been here since the beginning of the Conjugate Codex series. I have been having a great time. I hope you folks are learning something useful along the way. Also, big shout out to Steve Shaw and Massive Iron. If you're not following him, make sure you do. I'll include him down in the description box below. just send him a note saying thank you. He really helped inspire and push me to dive deep into YouTube and put out content of this nature. So again, Steve, love you, brother. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. I hope you're having a great day. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Best topics do get turned into videos. And folks, I'll see you next time. Stay safe, have fun, get stronger.